Hello, this is Randy Wooden, and this is from the Wooden Desk. I encourage you to pull up a chair today to the desk and to learn to grow. And I pray that something that is said will not only be practical, but it'll be prophetic and it'll be empowering to you, to your leadership team. Today, I'm going to deal with a subject that starting a series entitled Emotional Leadership. Emotional leadership. Emotions is one of those areas that every one of us have. And yet there are healthy emotions. And of course, there are toxic emotions. And there are even negative emotions that each one of us have struggled with, no doubt, through some level of our growth periods and leadership and even in our own personal lives. But what I realized more than ever before, how that leading a ministry, leading a organization, even leading our families, ultimately in a place with all of our emotions all of the time, can be a very dangerous thing. I've read books entitled Emotional Intelligence and the importance of having the competency to lead. And actually, that's true. We need to have healthy emotions in the sense of how they affect our personality, how they affect our profile of leading. But I realize more than ever before that this area of emotional leadership is an area that we deal with on a daily basis because we're dealing with people. So many times when a person enters into our office or our room to talk with us, we are challenged with a different emotion. Sometimes it's an excitement, and there's a lot of emotion of excitement. We like those kind we like that kind of leadership that is leading with excitement and that emotion, and especially from a background that I've come through, more charismatic and Pentecostal in the background. Automatically, we many times equated being emotional with maturity or even with being spiritual. And I can tell you that after leading for 40 years plus, that's just not true, because I've met a lot of people who are emotionally in their spirituality, but very immature in their faith. And yet at the same time, I have met leaders who lead totally emotionally on one high to the next high based on how well something goes. They're up if the emotions of everything went well, and if it didn't go well, then their emotions are way down here. Or people who are insecure are leading with emotions of intimidation or persuasion that is not healthy. And I could go on in different levels. But this lesson in this series is going to be very practical in the sense that I'm going to be talking about being able to fall out of love with our feelings. You know, when we're always leading with feelings, it's a very difficult thing because I don't always feel good every day, and there are times when, like yourself, that emotions have gotten the best of you, and I think without a doubt we have to be willing to fall out of love with our emotions. So that's one thing I want to coin as I get into this series of emotional leadership, because if we're going to have emotional leadership, we've got to do it with emotional intelligence. We have to do it with emotional maturity. We have to be able to know that we are leading people that have emotions. And so many times we'll sit around a table with the team and we're dealing with three different emotions, personality, even different personality profiles. And I'm not necessarily just talking about different personalities, because every personality has its own emotions, how they respond in a group setting, how they respond even in their own individuality. And I may bridge a little bit of that as I get into the series, but I realize we have to learn to master our emotions, master our emotions. I think it was a phrase that was used by Vincent van Gogh, who said, "Let us not forget that the little emotions are the great captains of our lives, and we obey them without even realizing." I really believe that's probably very realistic, because sometimes, you know, we lead out of where we're thinking. We lead out of where our heart is, and we're talking out of that. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks the mind. The Bible says, as a man thinks, so is he. So the reality is, if things are not in a place of health here, out here is going to become a little bit chaotic because we have got to allow us to have the peace. And one of the things I say continually is we have to allow the peace of God to rule our minds and our hearts. Because so many times the chaos of our society, and even with the pandemic and all of the challenges that come with that in leading, so many times you're dealing with people who are very discouraged, very depressed, or very emotionally exhausted, so to speak. I was just at an event where I had traveled, and I saw someone that used to be very, very vibrant, and I saw them, and I saw that they lost a lot of weight. And it was a young man, used to was in the gym, very, very well built. And I saw he lost a lot of weight, but he did, even his countenance was just so downcast. And his name was Joe. And I said, "Hey, Joe, it's good to see you." And I began to interact a little bit with him. And I could tell even his sharing, he seemed emotionally out of it. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he just for the next 5 minutes began to share that during the pandemic, he had a breakdown emotionally, his emotions. He went into depression and lost weight and ended up going to a doctor and trying to get help. And on the other side of it, it looks like somebody just blew a hole in the middle of him. He's not the same person that I saw. So I know that negative emotions and pressure that we are facing today can completely rewire the way people are operating and even the way they end up living a life that is not the life God ordained for them. And so many times in church settings, and especially as being a pastor for 36 plus years, realizing that you're leading always teams, people that just got a series of emotions, and you yourself are doing your best to navigate your emotions and keep them in a place of check, in a place of health. But I realize today we have to control these emotions, or as I said, they will control us. I heard a story about a young boy who asked his father, he said, "Dad, how do wars start?" Well, his father basically took the history of the First World War, and he talked about Germany that invaded Belgium. About the time he started to share, his wife chimed in and interrupted him and said, "Well, tell the boy the truth. Tell him that Belgium was provoked, and that's the reason why Germany was invaded." Well, the husband drew back up in an air of superiority and snapped back at her. "And are you answering the question or am I?" he said. And about that time, turning her back on him in a huff, she walked out of the room and slammed the door so hard that you could hear the dishes rattle on in the cabinet. Well, there was an uneasy silence that filled the room after she left. And the boy looked at his dad and said, "Never mind, Dad." He said, "You don't have to tell me anymore. I know now how wars start." Well, every one of us, if we are honest, this would probably sound familiar because we've all dealt with either family situations or tension between individuals or relationally where somebody loses their temper and says something and feelings just get out of control. What I realize is, what if I told you that this husband and wife really loved each other very much? You might say, "Well, I guess that could be true." But the reality is that the problem, though they were in love, is that instead of them being in love with each other, they were more in love with their feelings, with their emotions. It's so easy to become addicted or to fall in love with what I call anger, fear, anxiety, depression. You might say, "Well, I'm not in love with depression." Well, I realize that none of us would be in love with depression, but I realize that these emotions can begin to rule in our life so much that we embrace them. Not only that, impatience, frustration, and always these are roadblocks to good leadership and healthy leadership, as well as just having a satisfied life. If these feelings are often running in our lives, usually these negative emotions do nothing to bring us closer to God or to the people that we really care about. Yet, these emotions often seem to go everywhere we go. They do what we do. They want to be with us all the time. And yet, they are in fact the prime culprits many a times of distress and disunity in our own lives, families, even in our organizations. According to some recent statistics, that 1 out of 4 Americans are deemed to be mentally incompetent, or some would just simply say crazy, suffering from some kind of mental illness. Think about it. If your 3 best friends are okay, then it's got to be you. You must be messed up, or I must be messed up. It seems like sometimes we laugh about things like that. But if we're all honest, we've probably come from some kind of messed up background, or we've had to overcome some kind of negative in our lives, or a negative emotion or emotions in our own lives. Seriously, though negative emotions, as we see, sometimes have us at our throats, we have to be very careful that they can become very, very possessive in our lives or in our leadership chemistry. Become routine, sometimes habits in people's lives or even in our lives. Addicts, predictable patterns. So many times we fall in love with these negative emotions and become married to them. Well, you might say, well, why would we do such a thing? Well, as silly as it may sound, we actually get a high from it. You might say, what do you mean? You know, many a times what it's like to vent anger or to explode or to blow off some steam. Every one of us have been there. We know it's wrong, but sometimes we're sorry that we did it, but yet there's this high that comes of feeling superior, dominant, or a sense of, maybe as sad as it might sound, as belittling someone else, which I pray doesn't happen, but yet makes somebody else feel more powerful. And it becomes a drug almost. Yet, you may be thinking, everyone has emotional outbursts at times. Well, I know I have, and no doubt some of you that are listening have, but it doesn't mean that we're people that are totally ran by our feelings, or we're just totally in love with our feelings. But consider one of the definitions of love. Talked in a lesson not too long ago about being loved, that we can't properly love unless we know how to love God and love ourselves. But part of that was the Hebrew meaning of love comes from the Hebrew word ahav. And this word of ahav means to be attached or to cling to. That just what happens, that how often do we become attached to our negative emotions many of times. And many of times these negative emotions cling to us that cause us great emotional distress, depression, and we're not able to let go of them. And no matter how hard we try to get rid of them, it seems very difficult. And yet, so we get intolerant, we lose our temper, and we say things that we wish we wouldn't have said. Well, we become sarcastic, we become spiteful, unforgiving, retaliatory. The difficulty is I've seen leaders, I've dealt with leaders on my own teams who it seems like have had these emotions. And then ultimately, especially when we operate in some of those negative emotions, we become, ultimately feeling guilty and resentful or shameful that we did such a thing. Why? It's in the moment many a times that we lose control, or we lose control of ourselves, and we act impulsively. And I've come to the conclusion, if we do things impulsively, we can't lead with the maturity and with leadership that is going to have stability and is going to establish health. Because when we're leading impulsively, usually we're being led by our emotions. And sometimes some of those emotions are not good. We literally are driven by emotions and we can't seem to put on the brakes. Matter of fact, one of the areas of the fruit of the Spirit is what? It is temperance. It is self-control. The end result is that we hurt people, we lose control, we destroy the peace of mind in our own lives, And not only that, but we can lose our own credibility. See, having emotions, of course, is only human. But unfortunately, we can see how often these emotions have us rather than us having them. These powerful feelings are like tidal waves, many a time, sweeping over everything in their path, wrecking and just wreaking, so to speak, chaos in our lives and destruction, including damaging our own physical health. John Hopkins Hospital done a study of medical students and classified into 3 personality groups. The alpha, which were the cautious, reserved, quiet, under-demanding. The beta, people who were the beta, meaning they were spontaneous, active, outgoing. And then the gamma, which were the moody, emotional, and demanding. Something that they found was 30 years later, scientists looked at the health records of these former students, and they found that 77% of the gamma group, which were the moody and the emotional folks, suffered from major medical disorders and mental disorders, including cancer, high blood pressure, high heart disease, and emotional disturbances. These problems were only found about 20% in the other groups. So we even see that the makeup of our emotion and it sometimes and how we respond can even affect us in our internal being. My God. See, the lesson here that we're going to talk about in this first session, I want to establish falling out of love with your feelings will only change your life, and it can save your life. I don't know about you, but I want somebody to be able to, life to be saved. Oh, every one of us know what it is to emotionally eat. I'll use that one. Come home after a long day, tired, weary, frustrated with something or someone, only to go into the pantry and look for a bag of Doritos. That was always my go-to. A glass of tall milk and a bag of Doritos. I'll get even with you, and my emotions are going to have that bag of Doritos. Now, we laugh, and you might be laughing at that, but every one of us have done it, whether it's overeating or going on Amazon and buying something to try to soothe what's going on inside your own life. But so many times we become addicts because of the habits of our emotions, and we try to do something to soothe the issues that are going on. Well, in this way, for better or for worse, emotions move us to action. And ultimately, in fact, the root word of emotion is this area of inner motion, internal motion. Inside each of us, there is a number of what I call feelings moving, and yet move us in a certain direction and leading us to make decisions that shape our life. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. I'm going to go into this more in our second session, but today I want you to begin to take a moment and think about some of the emotions that may be leading you personally, leading your family, leading your organization, and you know they're not healthy. See, I think one of the things we're going to get to later in this series, we have to identify those emotions. Because if we don't identify those emotions, and sometimes in order to identify something, we need to bring someone else into the picture. That's why I call this the wooden desk, because I don't know of the hundreds of individuals that scooted a chair up to my desk over the years, and through questioning, through talking, through sharing, through prayer, through coaching, begin to realize some things that surface that were able to be revealed in order to bring about not only a place of health in their lives, but begin to get them in a place of real direction that was going to be fruitful and it was going to be productive. Well, I hope this has been a help to you, and I'm so honored that you are joining me on my time here from the Wooden Desk. And my prayer is that the kingdom of God will be enlarged in you and around you. God bless you, and have a great day.